Yes. Thank you very much, Ambassador Back, for this wonderful introduction. There's not very much for me to say anymore because it was already introduced what we are doing. But Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, firstly, I would thank to the President's office for inviting me to speak here. As Ambassador Back already mentioned, I was involved in the last Arctic Circle assemblies, and it's always a pleasure to come here. The last 3 days were quite intense, I would say, and I think you are getting tired, as am I. But still, I'm glad to see so much interest here in that final session. So you probably ask yourself, or at least some of you ask yourself, why Germany has an Arctic office and what it's doing. And I will give you a few reasons, examples, and also tell you a bit what we are doing, what we have been doing over the last couple of months. Let me start with science, because I am a scientist. And of course, you all know that the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar and Marine Research in Germany is one of the leading and one of the largest, maybe even, I don't know exactly, maybe even the largest polar research institute in the world. We currently have more than 1,100 employees and 128 million euro annual budget, running an icebreaker, our own icebreaker, aircrafts and polar stations in both the Arctic and Antarctic. And one part of the mission of the Institute is also knowledge-based consulting services for political, economic, and social arena. And this is one of the reasons why the Alfred Wegener Institute decided to establish this office as part of the Institute, as kind of a service also for the political arena, for the ministries, and also for the industry with an Arctic interest. First of all, of course, there's the Foreign Office, the German Foreign Office, which represents Germany on the Arctic Council. So the Foreign Office some years ago published the guidelines for the German Arctic policy, which are clearly stating the interests of Germany in the Arctic, which of course is very much science-based, but does not exclude also economic interests, which is, I guess, pretty obvious to everyone. But the way it is formulated in the guidelines is very clear, saying that this must be science-based, and it must be done in a way that it's not harming the environment, the sensitive environment of the Arctic. So I would say a bit later on that, but that's the general direction of the German guidelines for the Arctic. 2 years ago, our, at that time, Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier had a video message here, and I think at one of the first Arctic Circle assemblies, even our Chancellor Angela Merkel had a video message. So today it's only me, I'm sorry for that, but at least there's somebody here. The other one, of course, is science, and there's our Ministry for Education and Research, which is actually, of course, funding the Alfred Wegener Institute, but not only the Alfred Wegener Institute, but also a number of other institutes that have Arctic research or Arctic research programs. And in that context, I should, of course, highlight that the Alfred Wegener Institute is very much focusing on natural sciences. And to cover the full breadth of science, of course, it is very important that we also, within Germany, cooperate and work together with other institutes that are more into social sciences, political sciences, and the broad field of science that is relevant for the Arctic research. So one job of the Arctic Office is also to help connecting the Arctic interests of the various actors, also on the scientific side within Germany. And then we have the German Science Foundation, and the German Academic Exchange Service, mainly supporting the universities, and also the universities have, at least some of them, Arctic research projects. To the other interests, industry and transport. And most of these are, of course, connected to, as we all know, the declining sea ice and the better accessibility of the Arctic. And in terms of the industry, it's of course our Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy that supports two other major players also in the Arctic, which is the German Geological Survey, BGR, and the German Aerospace Center, DLR, which of course also have stake and interest in Arctic matters. And the other one is our Ministry for Transport, seeing that the shipping route, and Germany being a huge shipping nation, the shipping route between, for example, Hamburg and Japan is much, much shorter if you can go through the Arctic Ocean. And of course, our ministry and also the ship operators and the tourist industry, of course, they are looking at that and they are following that development. And so they are interested in what's happening in the Arctic. Finally, there are three other things. I should mention the fisheries, which of course also for Germany is an interest. The fisheries and our Ministry for Food and Agriculture is also interested in the Arctic. Environment is very much in the center of the German interest, and the Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Building and Nuclear Safety is also interested in Arctic. And finally, seeing in the first row our colleagues here, also the Ministry for Defense is of course looking at the Arctic in terms of security. And there was a security roundtable earlier this week here, which was very interesting. It was held in the Hofty House, which is the place of the Reagan-Gorbachev summit. And I don't think that the main result was that we see really a security issue, but I think people are following that and looking at that and observing what's happening in the Arctic. So what we are doing since some time already is a thing we're calling Arctic Dialogue, where we bring all these stakeholders from policy, from science together twice a year to exchange information, to update people on recent developments, and to just have a dialogue with all these within Germany who have a stake and interest in the Arctic. And that's became very successful and very useful, and also triggered the formation of the Arctic Office, because going much beyond only this dialogue, the Arctic Office has a couple of other duties and other activities. So the general idea is that it serves as an information and cooperation platform for German actors from science, politics, and industry. And of course, in that function, it's also meant to enhance the German visibility internationally, and also to have a more, let's say, coherent picture of Germany's interest in the Arctic. So more specifically, this national office is meant as a central point of contact within Germany. So if ministries have questions on the Arctic, they are now coming to us and they are asking us, and we are trying to help them. So we are trying to advise the federal government on Arctic-related issues. Of course, we cannot answer all the questions, but we have a network of experts from the various institutes within Germany. So we always know whom to ask. And that's, I think, the most important thing, that we help get the answers to all the questions. One major task of the office is also support the Foreign Office in terms of Germany's participation in Arctic Council activities. So we help finding the right experts, the right people to sit on the various groups of the Arctic Council. And we continue promoting this dialogue, as I said already. We do a couple of national and also international forums and events. So we bring people together. We co-organize things with various partners from ministries, from also from industry and from science. I will give a few examples later. And of course, we also, like we are doing here, support the federal government in the presentation of Germany's Arctic interests at international conferences, like the Arctic Circle. So also Arctic Frontiers should be mentioned, and other big conferences where we can help present Germany's interests. The last point I want to mention on that is the exchange, because it's not just to communicate science to policymakers, but it's also to get political questions back to the science, so that the scientists can, in their science programs, address these questions. So in my view, this has to be a dialogue. It has to go in both directions. So that's also an important element of our work, to communicate questions from policy back to the scientific community, so that when designing a scientific program, you can take these questions into account. So just a few examples of what we did recently. We worked very closely with the Finnish chairmanship of the Arctic Council. We organized a seminar in the Finnish embassy in Berlin just a few months ago, introducing the Finnish priority of the chairmanship to German ministries and other stakeholders. Based on that, just this week, actually, on Tuesday, we organized another seminar with the Finnish Environment Institute and the Finnish Ministry for the Environment in Helsinki, where we focused on environmental research in the Arctic Council. So, and we brought a number of German scientists, and we did this together with French, actually, trilateral, a number of French scientists, to talk about Finnish, German, French environmental research in the context of the Arctic Council. That seminar was very well received, and this cooperation with the Finnish chairmanship works very well. Next month, we are organizing something with the Norwegian colleagues. It will be in the Norwegian embassy in Berlin. And that goes more into industry cooperation, but also science, in terms of science diplomacy. So we put this program together with Arctic Frontiers and the Norwegian Foreign Office. We're also doing a couple of national things. Just last month, we did one in Potsdam, which brought together various research institutes and others interested in the Arctic and provided an overview of what's going on in the Arctic. And then also with industry, we are getting closer at the moment. So we organize a workshop in November with Airbus Defense and Space, where we talk about possibilities and needs for Earth observations in the Arctic. And also that seems to be very much interest for that within Germany and also within Europe, if you take the European Space Agency. One thing that was already mentioned, and we had a breakout session on that yesterday, is the Arctic Science Ministerial. And Germany, together with Finland and the European Commission, next year in October will host the second Arctic Science Ministerial in Berlin. We will build, of course, on the outcome of the first, which was held in Washington last year, but also introduce new things, new elements. And of course, the German Arctic Office will help developing the program and the agenda for the ministerial meeting, and especially for a scientific conference that we are holding the day before the ministerial meeting. And that's, of course, work we are doing very closely together with our Ministry for Education and Research. So before my time is over, just a few short take-home messages. So the first, of course, science and environment is really at the center of Germany's approach to engaging with the Arctic nations and Germany's Arctic interest. We're not an Arctic nation, but still operate one of the largest Arctic research programs. And the government sees also, of course, potential to the economics of Germany and Europe that Arctic Resources holds. But as I said, these interests are mainly marine technology, environmental technology, renewable energies, where German know-how and technology can hopefully help to support sustainable development of the Arctic. So we are committed to international cooperation, and the second Science Ministerial in Berlin is probably a good indication that we are very interested in fostering international cooperation in the Arctic. And finally, that with the German Arctic Office, we have something that connects the various actors from science, policy, and industry within Germany and also internationally. So if you want to know more, go to our website. It's in German and English, or just contact me through email or whatever. Thank you very much.